So Jesus, in his wonderful wisdom and the powerful predictions that he was saying, he was really trying to warn them and prepare them. So I love Jesus, don't you? And he was really focused on this time of answering the questions, if you remember, of what the disciples had originally asked, and that's when, what, and what. Kind of two of them together, these two, but when is the temple going to be destroyed? Because he predicted that. It's like all the stones are going to be down. It's going to not one stone upon another. It's going to be ruined, which happened, not long after that. And then they were talking about, like, what's the signs of your coming, and then also the end of the age. And Jesus, remember he's mentioned in the last videos here, the desolation that's going to happen, the destruction. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, and particularly the temple he was pointing to. And so they were asking when, and so he goes in and starts describing this stuff. And sometimes mingled throughout a little bit of this thing kind of gives hints of maybe even further future time, but most of it is going to happen 40 years from then. Now he mentions this really super sad, deep, desperate time that's going to happen here. He says, and I'm going to read it to you. This is our next part. He says, "For then shall be great tribulation," like a great time of trouble. We'll call it the big trouble here. And really sad for them, and it was really desperate times. He said, "Such as was not since the beginning of the world, or beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be." So it sounds like this is the worst time that ever has been and ever will be. This sounds like what he's saying. However, the scripture has a lot of things like that several times in the Bible, the Old Testament and all. It mentions like this is the worst it has been and ever will be. But I think it's what's a big word for you younger ones. It's called a hyperbole. It's like, whoa, a big exaggeration on purpose. If I say, man, it was 1,000,000 times that bad. I mean, if I'm talking about like the heat, I say, man, it was boiling hot. Well, it's not boiling hot where we boil or something. It's kind of an exaggeration to kind of give this feeling of how bad it was. Well, Jesus uses hyperboles through his scriptures, like a eye of a needle, the camel going through, if you remember. And there's a lot of those. And people do that nowadays, and it's a really cool language technique. And by the way, that's used not only in the Bible there, but also in writings and all. As a matter of fact, Josephus was saying the same thing. A Jewish historian was talking about this time period, and he said it was like the worst it's ever been, ever will be, and all that type of thing. So there's other writings that kind of say it. And by the way, Noah's time was worse judgment and trouble. Like 8 souls were saved. The whole earth was wiped out. So Jesus knew that, and yet he said this is the worst it's ever been. Well, it's kind of a big punch. It's a real big punch of an exaggeration on purpose, just to give you the feeling how dramatic this is going to be. It was a great tribulation, and that tribulation, I believe, was what he's talking about. As a matter of fact, he says it right here. Remember he talked about the abomination, desolation spoken of Daniel. Then he says, "For then shall be great tribulation." At that time, in other words, shall be great tribulation that's going to be really, really bad, you guys. So that is the trouble. And if you read like things outside of the Bible during this time, what was happening, like Josephus, it was horrendous, horrible. Lots of bloodshed and death, and even it got so bad that people was starving because of the armies that surrounded Jerusalem, and the people in Jerusalem couldn't get food, and to the point where they actually ate each other. Like, that's how bad people were dying, so they started eating their flesh. I mean, let's not talk about it anymore. Let's get off of that. But really super, super, super ugly time. It was a great tribulation. Happened right at that time. And then I'll read the next part. Then he said it was so bad that God literally cut the time. It was like really bad here, and he cut it so it wouldn't get even worse, in the sense of he says this, I'll read it. He said, except those days be shortened, like cut it. It didn't go on and on and on. It was a shorter time. He says, there shall no flesh be saved. I think what he's talking about, maybe, is the whole Jewish nation. You know, see, Rome came and attacked the Jews because, it's a long story, I've read some of this, how there was like arguing and fighting between the Roman leaders and at that time over Jerusalem and also Israel, and not just Jerusalem, but the whole time was a really hotbed of trouble. It was really arguing and then killing, and then they killed, and then they killed the soldiers, the Roman soldiers. That made it worse, and it escalated. And he said, Jesus, I think, is saying, if it could have gone on and on until the whole Jewish nation was wiped out. You know, all those precious Jewish people. Oh, it was a really tough time, and it was kind of instigated by the Roman government. But see, in my opinion, I say this humbly, I think it's God was using the Roman government as a tool of judgment against the Jewish people because of the rejection of the Messiah. Remember the parables that Jesus said and all in these past chapters. Matthew is talking about all this. You put it all together, you go, aha, I get it. And so it was judgment against the Jewish people. Not all the Jewish people. God knows who's wrong and who's right. And there were a lot of right Jewish people at this time too, but a lot more, especially the leadership. And so he said, except those days were shortened, they would have all died. The elect probably is at that point the Jewish elect. Could have been Christians. Of course, a lot of the Christians escaped out of there. So I think it's maybe talking about the elect Jews. Elect means chosen. God chose the Jewish people because of Abraham in the past. All right. So then he goes on, and I think right here, he starts talking about the false Christ. Well, he does. I don't have to think that. And the false prophets. You know, the people coming with false messages and all. And all through this mixture, there was all sorts of messages and messengers coming out and false teachers and things like that. And false messiahs. And he said, then if any man will say unto you, then he talks about this idea of, if any man says, here's the Christ and there's a Christ, Christ, here and there, like pointing to here's the Christ is going to come, here's a Christ, here's the Messiah, here's a Messiah, like like sort of like the return of the Messiah once Jesus is gone, because Jesus knew he was going to leave pretty soon. It was his last week at this time. He was crucified on the cross. He was dead and buried, and then he rose from the dead. He was on the earth for 40 days, 40 nights. He left. Then for 40 years, there was, Jesus is up in heaven. And there's all these false things that's going to happen. Satan does a flood. He sends a flood of just delusion and deceiving. So he warns them. He says, then if any man shall say to you, oh, here's Christ, or here's the Christ, here's the Messiah, here's the right Messiah. He's already returning. Jesus is returning. The Christ is returning, He said, no, that's not how it's going to happen, you guys. He says, for there shall also rise, like I mentioned, false Christs and false prophets. And by the way, they'll show great signs and miracles or wonders, insomuch that even if possible, even the elect will be deceived. Now, what he's saying there is that Satan, through false prophets and all, can do miracles. I mean, that there's going to be wonders and everything. So, and that's true. There's people that claim to do those things. And he's saying, if it were possible, the deceived will be, they'll be deceived. I mean, the elect will be deceived, the chosen. And then he says here, behold, I've told you before. Remember, he actually said this before about false prophets. That's what he started with. He said, I am the Christ, and for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and all deceive many. So he's emphasizing this. He's saying it again. As a matter of fact, he said in the next verse, he says, behold, I've told you before. Like I already talked about this. I want to make sure you get this and remember this. There's going to be a lot of false people. Then he says, if they say unto you, he is in the desert, don't go in the desert looking for Jesus. Oh, he's returned. He says, behold, if he like he's in the secret chambers, he's in this back there hiding. Don't believe it. Don't go after all these things. For as the lightning comes out of the east and shines into the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. In other words, here's the east and to the west. There's a lightning rod here, a lightning bolt here, right here, as the east is to the west. Not sure exactly what he's saying here. Could be two, three different interpretations. One is that you'll be actually able to see him. Now, this could be referring to a future thing when Jesus Christ actually comes back and he's visibly seen. Could be. Or in this context of this whole thing here, it could be like he's going to come, and he's going to, the coming of the Son of Man here, which is Jesus, could be a sense of the judgment of God on during this time on Jerusalem, and that he's really coming in judgment. And the lightning is used in the Bible, by the way, in the Old Testament, several times with judgment. So if you kind of put the Bible together, you say, what does lightning mean? Or is it just sharp, quick, sudden, like the coming of Jesus when he comes on the earth again? When he comes back, it's going to be sudden. Shoo, like he travels the sky, up in the sky from the east to the west. He really comes like flying through, and he comes and returns and gathers his people together. Or it could be a hint to the people, a code of judgment of Jesus Christ. The Son of Man is coming in judgment, lightning. It could be. All right. So then the next part says, and this, I have this last part here. If you can see this picture here, there's dead bodies. He talks about corpse, like a dead body here. And then he mentions some sort of bird. And it really, the best translation is vultures. Because vultures, if you know, they're nasty creatures. A dead body dies and vultures start gathering up there, and they get closer and closer, and there's a bunch of them, and they come down and they start eating the dead body. They feast on that. Well, eagles don't do that, and eagles don't come as groups. They're single here, singular. So the better word, excuse me, I got something in my eye here. It's itchy, He says, for wherever the carcasses, there will the eagles, was vultures, be gathered together. Not sure what this means. It could be another reference to the Roman government, because in Luke it talks about the armies of Rome will surround the city of Jerusalem. So it could be those are sort of like the vultures coming in, and they're coming after the dead bodies, and they're going to kill, and they're going to just destroy it. Could be that's the judgment, like the lightning, and the carcass is a dead body where the vultures gather together around it. That could be what that's talking about. Not sure. Anyway, I think that's it for right now. And again, as a quick statement of what he's really trying to do, is he's giving them warnings right now, and he's trying to get them mentally prepared for this great tribulation and all these horrible things that are going to happen, and also the flood of deception that Satan is going to try and do to cause them to follow after false people, leaders that rise up and all. Anyway, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you get a lot out of it, and we'll enter into the next section pretty soon. God bless you.